welcome to another episode of Quarantine with Fulbrighters, where we bring you the best and the brightest mind from all over Pakistan. And we have a mind from London here with us, but he is a Pakistani Fulbrighter. He did his master's in journalism from University of Nebraska Lincoln, and I'm quite excited to talk to him. Mr. Farooq Baloch, how are you, sir?
Very good, Shahzad. How are you? I'm equally excited, by the way. Been following you for quite some time. When you used to write for Express Tribunes, I used to read your columns.
I have a few checks that have still not been delivered. So
oh man, sorry, I'm not working for them anymore. But I can connect
so
you
I'm
with
sure
them.
you also have a few checks that have still not been
No, actually, my last check was good. I mean, with Provident Fund and all, so I'm good. Happy with that.
Oh, no. It's great to talk to you and sit with you here today, even if it's virtually, because you've founded a few of the respectable places that we have for financial journalism. I think we did not think about financial journalism much before you started, or you sort of founded a couple of these organizations. So let's get into that. How did you get into financial journalism, and how did you think about these ideas of making things like Profit or SAMAA Money?
All right. First of all, thank you for the kind words. Actually, when I was on my Fulbright master's, there I signed up for a business reporting course with a gentleman called Joseph Weber. He was a former correspondent, chief of correspondent at Business Week, which is also a reputable publication, later bought by Bloomberg. So when I studied there, so I sort of developed this interest in businesses, how they really create jobs and they really contribute to the economy. I thought, okay, that is also another form of journalism that I'm really intrigued about, because before that I was a city reporter. So that's where I made up my mind. So I got good grades in that course. And after that, when I returned to Pakistan, I joined Express Tribune. They wanted me again as a city reporter, which was my former sort of expertise. But I said, no, I want to do business journalism. So I ended up being a business journalist, started the Express Tribune, and it was a great team. I don't think I was the best there, but the team I work with, they had some of the finest business journalists you can find in Pakistan. So there I learned a lot. And from there, basically, like after spending 4 years, nearly 4 years, this guy, Babar Nizami, is the managing editor of Profit. He came up with the idea of launching Profit magazine. And to correct you, actually, I didn't found it. I was a co-founder, sort of, because I was founding editor reporting, but it was actually his idea. You can say it was something in my mind already. Pakistan needs this kind of product where we can, do really hard-hitting stories in a really blunt tone and hold the, say, business elite accountable for their corporate governance and their strategies. He came up with this idea, and I was not his first choice, by the way. I was sort of an alike.
This is why I said sort of founded.
Yeah, I sort of found it. So yeah, you're smart actually. So when some of the ace journalists, when they turned down his offers, he came to me, okay, Farooq, will you be interested? I thought, yeah, why not? Well, it was not a straightaway decision, because leaving Tribune for a smaller, less known publication wasn't an easy decision. Some of my friends said, you're going for a professional suicide. I said, I don't care. I mean, I want to do something new. And this idea is really interesting. I believed in the idea, wasn't really sure about its success, but that's how we came up with it. And I think the first 2-3 issues, and we really launched with a bang, and we just sent a signal, okay, we are there. And we did, I think, some of the biggest stories in business, I'll say business journalism, like about HPL, about Tapal, about Jazz, Dawood Hercules. You can think of any big company, Jazz, and we did really hard-hitting stories that sort of made a name for Profit. So there I was head of reporting, like doing my own stories, and launched a few journalists, some young journalists, trained them. And 3-4 years from there, and then SAMAA Money, again, my foray into digital journalism, because I've been a print journalist all my life. Again, it was not easy. It was difficult, but I thought, okay, this is something new. I should try it. So initially, I was doing only reporting, like sort of, was very different from what I did previously at Tribune or at Profit. I was like public service journalism, as my editor would call it, like interpreting stories. We were not really much into breaking stories, rather than explaining stories in a way that even a layman can understand, or a child can understand. So when she liked the idea, she just threw me before the camera one day and said, okay, you need to start doing videos. That's how SAMAA Money basically came into being. Again, that was not my sole idea. That was her idea. But yes, the content, I was heading it first as a sort of one-man army. Then I think a year into the into SAMAA Money, I hired a reporter and then a sub-editor. So yeah, people like the way we were explaining things, especially the way we were visualizing things, the difficult economic and financial concepts using animations and very easy scripts. So that's it.
No, that's brilliant. And the work that you're doing, there are some sacred cows that everybody mention daily on the night on the news, that those are sacred cows, but then there are actual sacred cows that can't even be mentioned that they're sacred cows, and those are companies, because that is where the revenue model of these news organizations largely comes from. So for them to go after them is sawing off their own legs if they do not
It
get
can be
that ad
costly, Shazad.
revenue.
Sorry to interrupt. Can be costly.
Absolutely.
Because you're writing, at the end of the day, you're writing against people who are responsible for for your paychecks.
Yes.
So it cost us, especially at Profit. There was a very, very huge bank. I don't want to name that, but
You
they
already
sort
did.
of
You already told us the bank you did the story of.
no, but the story I'm going to talk about, I'm not
Okay.
really naming it. So
Okay.
I wrote about
So
many
you
banks.
wrote a story on one bank, but it could be another bank that
Could
did
be
this to
another
you.
one. So yeah, so it cost us in terms of loss of potential sponsorship. So these things also happen. People don't know. They understand that the pressures are only personal threats with that kind of stuff, but it could also be commercial threat. You know.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the news, people really talk about the news in terms of, oh, they miss just getting the news. But at this point, the present day that we live in, you're not going to get a Walter Cronkite. You're not going to get somebody at 9 p.m. just reading the Khabarnama. Do you have an opinion on this current news model that is so heavily dependent on commercial revenue that comes from ads? Is it fundamentally flawed? Do we really need to rethink how we do the news from scratch?
Well, I don't think it's fundamentally flawed. I mean, every industry evolves over time. We have seen that happen, in banking. Now here in the UK, the challenger banks are really taking on the big ones, the legacy banks. We have seen Wall Street bets, how the communities like Reddit, they sort of turned the tables on the Wall Street giants by investing in meme coins. So things have changed, and I think journalism should also change. Yes, we need to rethink the model, and I think we should have done this long time ago. That's why I always kept taking risk with Profit, because it was something new, something different, and then coming up with SAMAA Money. uh, uh, I'll say you need to find out other revenue streams. You just can't depend on say commercial sponsors, because they can sort of, as we've seen in the last few years, how journalism is struggling in Pakistan, because initially there was some squeeze on advertising revenue, especially from the public sector, and then private sector, obviously they can also use you. And what worries me more about current model is the way journalism is now shaping up. These sponsors need eyeballs. If they're getting a decent number of eyeballs from, say, individual YouTubers, why would they go to a news channel who can especially do hard-hitting stories against their business, expose them for their wrongdoings? So this is something that worries me. So this is where I like the idea of SAMAA Money, but it was still in the experimental stages. It was still very new. I did a few sponsored videos as well, and I really had a tough time to decide what should be our editorial strategy, where we don't really compromise or give away too much of our editorial freedom, but at the same time develop a model that is sustainable. So it was doing really, really well. But I was, to be honest, initially not comfortable doing sponsored videos myself, because in the last 10 or so years, we have been told and we've been trained in a way that we don't really interact with marketing people or speak to sponsors. We are just concerned about our reporting or editorial content. But as things have evolved, you really have to work like a company. You need to deal with marketing people, you deal with sales people. The reporters really have to be involved. And I at times made a whole, entire proposals for sponsors, because I knew what the content was about, who would be the potential sponsor. But there, if you're lucky, you can sometimes find really, really good companies like we did. They were really good. They accepted our questions, even some really, really critical questions. I said, I'm going to ask these questions. If you agree to it, we will go ahead, otherwise we're not doing it. So they agreed to it. They understand, okay, that's your area. And some of them really gave me full freedom in terms of my script. No um, no sort of intervention at all. So that was good. But others there were a couple of occasions where we had to say no because there was a big sponsor who really wanted an ad to be included in the report and not reflected as such. I said, no, that's not okay. So they were paying good money. And then if you look at the YouTube model right now, I don't say that many of these people are identifying themselves as journalists. But I still feel that they're still sort of competing with us, but they're doing like literally they're doing ads and there's no mentioning of it. There are no disclaimers and they sort of show them as stories. And sometimes I also feel, and in one case, I think somebody was promoting Ponzi scheme. So that's really problematic. And the legacy media businesses, they need to think about it because this revenue pie, this is sponsorship pie is basically dividing into very, very, I'll say a lot of small pieces, individual YouTubers. If you don't think, if you don't find a solution about it, you just, you're going to lose in the long term. So you need to come up with different models. SAMAA Money, I mean, there was still, I'll say it was not in its in the shape that I was expecting because I left too early. It was just 2 years, but I was visioning a model for journalism industry that okay, YouTube monetization is one model where you can going forward have public fund your content, things like that. So where you have less dependence on the sponsors. I'll say anything where any model where you have less than 50% of your revenue coming from sponsors, you have a lot of freedom.
If I may offer a counterpoint, I think even if you work with some companies which were kind of at the end you're relying on the benevolence of the corporate sector, and for instance the hard-hitting journalism that you actually need to do, that can never be sponsored. You cannot go to a bank and say we're going to expose all the wrongdoings that are happening in the bank. And the independent journalism that you're talking about, I see that as a good thing. I think all the critique that you had of independent journalists on YouTube equally applies to news channels and legacy media, to the extent where it's sometimes hard to even decipher if the news channel itself is a Ponzi scheme, because we all know news channels in Pakistan that push Ponzi schemes, that push housing schemes, and then the boundary just completely gets blurred to the extent where most people in Pakistan can tell you the tinge or the tilt of the news channel just based on their name. If the independent journalist pushing this, and we live if we have that field of where we do not have legacy media, or we still have legacy media but primarily people get the news from independent sources on YouTube, and a YouTuber does push a Ponzi scheme, the ability of 40 other YouTubers to call that person out and expose the Ponzi scheme is much stronger and is much more accessible than 40 people going after a legacy news media channel that exists in everybody's house and has infinitely more resources than any independent YouTuber can manage. So the thing that I was saying about the fundamental flaw that we need to rethink, and you also mentioned meme coins and Reddit groups going after Wall Street, but they are showing you the fundamental flaw in the Wall Street model by doing that. So independent journalists on YouTube, which are publicly funded. So if you like your favorite journalist, go to their Patreon page and fund that. Isn't that a much better model than the legacy news media, which gatekeeps these news agencies, and you need a lot more resources to own a news channel?
Well, with that question, you're taking the discussion into the whole new direction. Just give me a few minutes and bear with me on that. Firstly, guilty as charged. I will not defend legacy media. I know the stuff that you have said that really exists. But there are biases as well, not just the sort of commercial interests, but obviously there are interests. Channels in Pakistan are actually owned by businesses, not really leaving a few which are exception, which have traditionally been corporate giants and businesses. They came into media just to protect sort of their own interests. So that thing is there. But there is a difference because when you are an individual YouTuber, for example, regardless of how ethically upright journalist I am, or some of my colleagues are, I'm not using my example, I do blunders, but some other journalists who are really reputable, respected, at the end of the day, they're working for a company and they don't control the policy. And if you're an individual YouTuber, you control the policy. If SAMAA Money was my own channel, I would have been, in complete control of who to take sponsors from and who not to. But when I'm working for a company, I would argue to a certain extent, but at the end of the day, I'm doing a job. I have to listen to my boss. That's one difference. Secondly, as you said, um, the model of individual journalists being funded by public is far better. I understand, but even in that case, there are challenges. When you have an entire organization backing you, sort of have a community behind you. It is an advantage in the sense that you are dealing with people who are high up in the, say, bureaucracy, or say ruling political elite, or even military, and that sometimes helps you, provides you the backing, where if you are in trouble, if we have seen what happened with the Grado lesson recently and how he was bailed out. Eventually, Salman Saab had to intervene. I'm not going into whether ARY is you know a good example to quote, but then again, he was bailed out by his bosses because of the connections and being part of the industry. If you're an individual, you're on your own. And uh, and I'm not saying that these guys, the YouTubers, they're doing something wrong, but they're still in very nascent stages. And I really thank them because I looked up to them. I just watched few of them, and then I learned how to do videos on YouTube, to be honest with them, because, well, for me, this work is not new. I've been a journalist for more than 10 years, but the platform was very new. And I had to tweak my style to sort of, you know, tailor made it for the YouTube audience. And I learned it from them. But, these guys are shaping up the future of how the content should be, disseminated. So they should sort of come, I know these guys also have some groups, they collaborate with each other. We should also collaborate on finding some sort of common code of conduct. Okay, guys, we have to sort of set up code of ethics, or maybe some rules that we should stick to, because at the end of the day, in the long term, these guys are the pioneers and they will be remembered for their contribution. But at the same time, if they set some standards, okay, this is how we should do it, because I agree with you, the legacy media, they have failed. They were more interested in protecting their own
So
interest than
you're
journalism.
so
And
you're
I
you're
can tell
saying
you, recently I came across a example about Bloomberg, and it's very much the same here, although it's a very reputable organization. So these things happen everywhere.
so you're saying the legacy media does not have a code of ethics, but independent YouTubers,
They
an
have,
app
I mean,
where
they
anybody
have
can
a
upload a
they
video,
have
should
they
have.
have code of ethics. Sorry to interrupt. They have code of ethics. They don't apply. I mean, you
so,
even I've
so they might
recently
as well not
I've
have it.
studied an ethics class, and they will teach you all kinds of they go to the very minutest of the details, even about things that do not involve money, but sort of duty of care, responsibility towards your sources, keeping your promises. But when you see in the practice these things, you really find people applying those ethics. And when I'm not saying, I'm not really holding them to account, I'm just saying, and I sort of now belong to the same community because I have started my own YouTube channel. But I believe that since these guys were not journalists, they should not do the same mistake that we did. So maybe they can do something better and teach us, okay, see, you guys screwed up, but we know, okay. I mean, to be honest, I'm fine with that. You need to run your kitchen, you need to pay your bills. And these guys are doing some really top quality content creation. And some of it is as good as any journalist can produce, even better than that. I've seen documentaries from Muru about, giving tributes to the mountain hikers, was one hell of a piece. And, sometimes you come across pieces from Junaid Akram, Irfan Junaid. These guys are doing really superb work. But then at the same time, and I'm not trying to single out these people, I'm talking about the community in its entirety. At the same time, they should also be setting some standard in terms of, all right, okay, we are going to make money, but at the same time, maybe there should be some minimum, standard that we should agree. But then again, these guys are, um, I don't know if they have a union or some representative body where they can come, sit and talk and brainstorm ideas. That's how we should go about it. And then again, it will be unlimited numbers. But unlike media company, which is hard, you need a license, you need a big investment. And again, as you said, resources, coming back to your point, yes, legacy media has resources, but at the same time, their cost of operation is so high. You just can't compare their cost of operations with that of a YouTuber. They have to, burn a lot of cash in producing the content that people watch. But unlike the guys who just hold their cameras and, on selfie mode, they'll make a video and get 1 million views. So it's different. So the cost of doing business in legacy media is still very high, which is something that worries me, because you can't compete with this high cost with people who don't really have good, such a high cost, but at the same time, they're coming up with good content.
I think this we will get into an endless debate if we start debating
Yeah,
what the
that's what I
cost of
told you.
legacy media is and if they're spending it right. Because if a person holding a camera on the street can produce better content than somebody who has a studio and has is paying somebody crores to produce a show, then maybe how they're spending that money needs to be looked at and revised. But I mean, even if all the top content creators in Pakistan sit down and come up with a code, they cannot stop the man on the street from making a video and uploading on YouTube. YouTube has a minimum standard that it can't be blatant disinformation. And I think when COVID disinformation was being spread rapidly, YouTube took a stand. I believe in people. I think the cream will always rise to the top. So if somebody is pushing Ponzi schemes regularly on their channel, they will eventually be exposed. And I trust the people. But if we come back to your journey, because I feel this is a much longer debate that we are engaging in, how did you get into this? So I'm assuming you were a city reporter and you talked about being at Express. How did you think about switching to financial journalism, or is that something you thought about while doing your Fulbright Masters?
Uh, well, if you ask me about how I got into journalism, so that was sort of an accident. I wanted to be a cricket commentator, so but I didn't really have good scores in my intermediate, so I applied for MA English at Karachi University, but I couldn't make it. So, and I think as second option, I put mass communication. So I got in there, and there I had this one of my teachers, Kamal Siddiqui, was the city editor at the news. He was our visiting lecturer. He offered me that there are some openings at the news, you should apply. So many of my class fellows applied, and that's how I got into journalism. But once I was there, I sort of liked the job because I thought this is something that gives me a lot of satisfaction at the end of the day, because I did not come by choice, but I like to stay here by choice, because the work I was producing was sort of, highlighting the problems of, of the city. And, especially I was covering education beat. So I used to say, worry a lot about our education system. But when I started exposing the problems of our education, that gave me satisfaction. Okay, I'm making my contribution, not just, ranting about something, but also trying to be part of a solution, at least highlighting the problem, highlighting proposed solutions. But as a journalist, obviously, I could not solve those problems. I could only talk about it. So that's how I sort of stayed in journalism, because I liked that. I was creating some impact, touching upon some lives, helping people, becoming voice of those who are sort of weak, could not be heard. And that was like long time back, and there was no YouTube, no Facebook. The journalists were really, I'll say, the only platform for these people to get their voices heard. There was different back then. So I liked it. And then after Fulbright, as I said earlier in the discussion, that I really liked about how America became the world leader because of the research and innovation, and businesses that started from scratch and they made big, and what were their policies and strategies. That again, US has a downside as well, that you've seen what's going on these days. So too much capitalism is also not good. So uh, responsible, whether it's journalism or it's business, if you are doing your work responsibly, that is what basically is something that really intrigued me. So I thought, okay, maybe if I can do business reporting and sort of highlight the stories where people can learn, okay, how to start a business, what are the strategy of the most successful businessmen, some of the most successful businessmen in the world, and what leads to failure in terms of getting one decision wrong, which leads to a collapse of entire business. So these kind of things really intrigue me into business reporting. And I really saw how these businessmen change people's worlds and opportunities. They really expand people's worlds and opportunities, because there's a limit to how much jobs the government can create. At the end of the day, it's private sector that leads the innovation, the job growth, and at the end of the day, economic growth. Because you go anywhere in the world, it's the SMEs that basically sort of contribute to the economic growth, which eventually contributes to the prosperity of the entire society. So these things really intrigue me. I thought, okay, it's not always about exposing corruption in a municipal say administration, or a some small department of a city government. You can also talk about businesses. That is also an interesting form of journalism. But over time, I realized when especially when this The job market became dismal and I was pretty tight. Journalists were losing jobs in Pakistan. And I always found people chasing me, offering me jobs. And I realized, okay, I'll be the last one to lose my job in this profession because it's sort of specialized. And business journalists in Pakistan, there are many good business journalists, but they're very, very few in numbers. So there's still a very huge scope for business journalists. So that basically sort of made me stay into it. And then at this stage, like at 40 years, I'm pursuing another specialized education, financial journalism, because I really want to do this for the rest of my life.
It's a good lesson for everybody listening. Always keep learning, and it's also credit to you and the work that you've done. That I believe Khurram Hussain is now the editor at Profit, and hopefully he will take that work even further. Since you were already doing journalism before your Fulbright masters, and then you went and studied journalism, how different was studying journalism, or what did you learn that you did not have in Pakistan uh, on your Fulbright masters?
I think it's world apart. I mean, in in Pakistan, I had some really good teachers. Especially they were the ones who got me into the industry. They had the same approach where you could really sort of make a comparison with the US. But other than that, like majority of the learning, uh, not really blaming them. We need a very, I'll say, systematic overhaul. But majority of the teachers were not really up to date about the changes that were going on, and the media was really changing fast. And they did not sort of see it, and they did not really, because the purpose of the academia is to prepare you for the job market. I think that's one area where they sort of did not really succeed, because uh, you would submit your assignments, you not really get feedback, and at the end of the day, you just get your marks. You don't even know where you went wrong. Here, they give you like the same happened in Fulbright, same happened here in my marketing journey, because they give you a formative assessment where you turn in your assignments, and then they will critique it, and they will critique it so bad that you'll say, okay, you don't even know anything. And then they'll give you suggestions how you could improve it to just meet the publishing standards of international publication. And then there's the second chance, and then you submit this, and it's not easy. All the assignments, all the coursework that they make you go through is very much real life. I mean, it's hands on. So once you start searching for job, you already have you know the kind of training that you would expect in a newsroom. So it makes the job easy. So when you go into the interview, the chances are high you'll impress the interviewee. And then at the same time, if you have some academic samples that, okay, this is the report I've done, they will like it. So going back to Karachi University experience, I think apart from one or two teachers, this thing was lacking. That was the huge difference. And then the curriculum itself, like the books that you were learning were very old, not really up to date. And I think that's pretty much the case. It's not just Karachi University, across Pakistan, in public sector especially, that they don't update the curriculum very often, especially in industry, which was the verge of changing. The media landscape was changing. The transformation to digital was going on. Although it did not hit the industry until at least 5 or 10 years later, but you anticipate and you prepare for the future. You don't wait for things to happen and then start preparing your students, because the students of today are going to be the workers of tomorrow. So these were the few notable differences that I can identify. Yes.
So all the great work that you've done since your Fulbright, after coming back, whether it's Profit, whether it's SAMAA Money, what are some of the lessons, or what are some of the key takeaways that you learned during your Fulbright experience that you brought back?
I think the biggest is risk taking. I see how Americans always take risk in Pakistan, and it's not just journalism. I think it's everywhere. As a business journalist, I've seen people the best they can come up with. Now this is changing recently because of the new generation. I think perhaps we are more connected globally, and they know how they should be taking risk and coming up with new ideas. But if you go a few years back, I think people wouldn't take risks. For example, a job I took, I knew the journalists who were offered this opportunity before me to start Profit, they were far better than me, but they were not taking risks. They were risk averse. And this really surprised me why. And similarly, I covered many businesses, and most of them, when people ask me about business ideas, what I see around me and what I can judge from the queries, they want to start a food joint, a bakery, restaurant. No, nobody's thinking about, some sort of innovative products, maybe some coming up with something new. That's where I like the idea of bike. Though, I mean, you can say Uber is the pioneer, but it's still sort of a I'll say divergence from the main idea of using the cars. They are using the bikes. So that was something interesting. They took a chance, and it made it. They made it successful. So you people, but I think maybe that has changed in the recent years. But in the years that followed my Fulbright experience, that is something I noticed that people were not taking this. So that's the biggest highlight. That once you're in a market like US or UK. So you are part of this culture where everybody is willing to take risk. Everybody is at their creative best every single day. They're not worried about what will happen, whether they'll fail or not. So this is something we really need to work on. That's one thing. The other, obviously, as we discuss, I think we need to work on our curriculum. As uh, as I said earlier, I still feel that how many I don't remember. You can just count on your fingertips. There are maybe one or two universities that are offering specialization in business journalism. Why do you need an MA journalism degree right now at this stage? I don't think so. It's not going to serve any purpose. You need a specialization. The university studying here, City University, they have an MA in, say, investigative, an MA in financial journalism, MA in TV journalism. So they're not teaching like something that is catch all. They're just teaching you specialized education. And I think maybe 5 years from now, they will perhaps close some of the programs because there's not much demand in the market. Plus, there are things that you can learn. You don't need to go to a journalism school to be a YouTuber, to be honest. So, what is that you need? Why somebody should spend 1 or 2 years of their lives, and of course, on top of that, money to go to a journalism school and then get benefit from it, because if you can learn the same things from YouTube and from internet search, why would you go there? So these are some of the highlights that I think these guys keep innovating, because if they did not go towards specialization, obviously they'd be the same, like 10 years behind.
It's so interesting that, and it's always lovely talking to Fulbrighters, because the takeaway is not from the education, from the masters. It's from the Fulbright experience at large. And we keep reiterating the same thing, that it's the Fulbright experience. It's not just the degree.
Yeah. And the way the program is conducted, I mean, I don't know if people are aware of this or not, because they think it's just education program. It's not just an education program, it's a cultural exchange. I mean, from day one, you are sent to, and you've been there as well. So you are sent to different families, spend a night there, explore their culture. And there are events during your term where you go to a different state, you interact with other students. So, and then they make you do some volunteer work. And that's where I felt, I mean, to be honest, I could only blame myself for not being updated, because I know people do volunteer work in Pakistan as well, but I only got to know about it when I was on my Fulbright experience, because it was part of the program and I could not opt out of it. But once I did it, I sort of realized, okay, yeah, this is something we should be doing, quite more often. I think there is this practice in corporate Pakistan, but I don't think that in the media industry, we are still focusing on this area, like teaching people to volunteer, giving back to the community. I'm not sure, because I've been part of 2 universities where I taught as adjunct faculty. Maybe I did not know if there was one, but I did not come across it. So yeah, so this is the
maybe
overall
maybe
experience.
maybe now when you come back, we see a lot more volunteer work in the organizations that you're a part of. Thank you so much. It was lovely talking to you, and I realized that the debates we started are much longer, so hopefully we can
Yeah,
also have a conversation when you're back in the country. But thank you
this
so
needs
much for your
another
time today.
entire episode. Yeah, it was a pleasure talking to you.
All right, thank you, sir, for joining,
Thank
and
you.
thank you for listening. Take care. Bye bye.